Look at this, fella. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Deal With It, Mastering Your Kung Fu. I am Brad Chester, the youngest man of 40K, and with me I have Sean, Dice with Rice. He is back from the dead. I said he's a newcomer to being sick. I laughed at his sickness. I told him, if you're going to be Nurgle, go full Nurgle. He didn't even do that. He was like partial Nurgle. You were like a Dark Eldar at that point in time. It wasn't even full Nurgle.
Yeah, some of us sleep for 19 hours out of 26 hours, and they're like, "Oh, this isn't good." And Brad's like, "That's chump change. Every day is misery."
Accept it and move on, sir. That's all you need.
All right. Well, Brad, we have a good one for today, actually.
We have an interesting mojo to go through. Well, let's start with the pre-recording. Lyle Dixon with a $2 super chat. Where is Deal With It, Blood Angels, you cowards? You know, we'll make that next.
If you want it, we've heard your cries. How to hit your opponent with 2 groups of Centurions on turn 1. Coming up in the next Deal With It.
Boom. I mean, the best part is we'll just make a Blood Angels army that includes no Blood Angels models. Just run straight Iron Storm and piss him off. Yeah, there you go.
We ship them hot sometimes. Hot takes.
So we're going to talk about things that we're going to be doing in the future. We're going to talk about our coaching availability. We're going to talk about what we do. And this is a sample of things that we look at. We look at macro gameplay. And this one, well, it might run long and we might kind of gloss over a couple things because macro gameplay, because one of us was a little overzealous in the things that they wanted to cover today. And I was like, Sean, what would you like to go over today? And he said, how about everything ever in 40K? And I was like, oh, that should probably fit in an hour. So why not?
We took a week off for me, and I was like, oh snap! All right, gotta hit him hard when I come back.
I didn't realize that you went from Makari to the Emperor in a fucking a fever dream. You saw into the future.
I was actually hurtling through the warp for those 19 hours of sleep.
It was 19 hours, but also forever. Well, let's talk about this. What actually happens during a 40K game? And one of the biggest things I want to talk about before we even talk about what happens is before that 40K game, you have to start understanding, we're going to go through all these things, but you have the biggest thing that you do when you're looking at how I'm getting better, how am I growing as a 40K player, is understanding what is actually happening. Why do these things happen? And these things happen pretty much every game. And you have to understand how I could interact with them. So let's go into the key concepts. So we've got the push. Now, this is going to be a big deal every single time because the push is the moment in the battle where you just commit. And that could be turn 1, it could be turn 5. And it all depends on the situation, the mission, the army you're playing against. But at one point in time, you're going to commit the majority of your resources into your opponent's army. Now, that goes before the push. A lot of times you're going to be trading. And trading means that you are basically giving your opponent a piece to take away their piece. You're playing chess and you're hopefully giving yourself the best. What we talk about, one of the concepts that goes with that is hopefully you're always trading up. You want to be trading up. Not either in points or in number of units per. If you're playing a horde type army that has or an MSU army that has 1 million units, you want to make sure that you're always going 2 for 1, especially if you have an elite army. If Sean and I are playing a game right now and we're trading and he's playing Custodes and I'm playing MSU Marines, well, if we're trading units 1 to 1, he's trading down.
The best thing I can think of to explain this concept to somebody who doesn't know it is if you've ever had a super tough Catan walk to the middle of the table and stand in the open and say, I'm going to score this primary point unless you get rid of me, and it takes your whole army to get rid of it. That moment where you're standing out there in the open trying to kill that Catan and you fail, or maybe you barely do, and then the whole of the Necron army gets to move out and do whatever they want to you. That is exactly why trading is a concept. You don't want that to be happening to you.
How about WOG, Clonwoad? You know what, Clonwoad? WOG is huge because, as I was teaching just yesterday, if you get somebody to WOG before it's time or in the wrong time, it can be a game changer. And that would be trading down. So, normal 40K. And I do like this quite a bit. And you stole this from me because I call this all the time because we have it on 0, step 0, but I call it deployment turn 0. And deployment's a huge deal. We're going to talk about this more because I always say you can't deploy to win, but you can definitely deploy to not lose. Because from deployment, you have to establish position. And establishing position doesn't mean just standing on objectives. Establishing position means that you could stand on the objective and you can take your opponent off objectives, which leads us to number 2, which is trading. The part of the game when you're trading, a lot of times, and the thing is that you could go 2 and 3, continue trading until the push, but that could go the whole game. If your opponent never gives you a reason to push, well, you're just not going to push. Like if you just stand on objectives, you're playing Hammer and Anvil, Sites of Power, and you've got 2 characters on 2 objectives and you're taking your home field and your opponent doesn't take you off, that will never do anything. You know what I mean? And that is something that you have to look for, but there usually is the time when your opponent realizes he has to take the game back or you have to take the game back from them, and then the push comes and then you get final scoring. I cannot stress enough that you have to know the score the entire game. Know your score, know the projected score, because you're going to play differently based on whether you're winning or losing. I can't tell you the amount of games that I've won where my opponent's surprised at the end of the game because they've been hammering my units that I'm winning. And then you get to the game and they're like, oh shit, blah, blah, blah. It's too late. If I'm playing Sean and I don't realize that I'm losing the game until top of 5, well, that's too late. Now I probably don't have a chance to come back. So you always have to know. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Yeah. But you need to know when to trade, and you have to know when to push. And that's a big deal. And that's one of the things, that's a core concept that sounds simple, but it's very, very difficult to master on that.
Yeah, this is where Brad was saying, you look at this, a normal game of 40K, each of these represents a turn in the game, and we could do an entire hour, 2 hour, 3 hour long thing on each of these for
100%.
every army. But we don't have that time today, so we're gonna speed along here.
I do love the fact that, as Dodgeball explained, it's a 5-player swing. Now, this is a huge deal, and I do want to go over this real quick, and it's going to take, this is why I said we're taking forever today. I love this slide. If you hit your opponent hard, you hit them first. You win. No one wants to be hit first, but hitting first doesn't mean like the first model lost. If I consistently give Sean trash, my chaff, and he has to consistently give me a real unit, I have hit first. Even though he's taken away the first pieces on the board, I have taken away a real piece. I'm taking away a rook. He's taking away pawns. You know what I mean? Some of my stuff is not even a pawn. It's like the Diet Coke of pawns. But it's a big deal on that because you got to know when you're going. Because if we just stood across from each other, Braveheart style, if Sean goes first, he just wins because he kills 25% of my shit. I only kill 15% of his shit, back and forth. You know what I mean? So it's important to be the hitter. So tell me about battlefield roles.
So if you checked out one of our other videos, we also went over kind of the roles your army can take in a 40K game. That's especially important when you look at the game as a whole. Like, what does your army want to be doing on each turn? Well, to know kind of what your role is during that turn, you have to know what type of army you have. So we did an entire hour-long video on each faction, where it kind of slots into in these roles. You can check that out either on Death or Glory or Dice with Rice. The Cliff Notes, stat check. It's the first type. All that means is the army that you brought requires your opponent to have a certain amount of weapons to deal with you. This could be your knight army, right? You need a lot of las cannons, you need a lot of strength 12 or higher stuff to actually punch through those knights. It can also mean I brought 200 Hormigaunt bodies, and you didn't bring storm bolters, you just brought las cannons, which means you can never actually kill my models, my units. And I'm going to swarm the field. Aggro. This concept is I want to get at you. I want you to spend your time dealing with my models instead of scoring your points. And then, as Brad said, usually all their models are gone and their score is really big, and that's all she wrote. And by the time you try to check the score, you've killed all their models and you're down 30 points. Board control. This is where I would say Brad and I have our specialties. Board control, Cliff Notes, you just want to control what your opponent can actually do each turn. This means you're going to limit where they can actually move to score, where they can move without losing a bunch of units that are important to them, and you're going to play a lot of close, very mentally draining, long thought out games. And finally, attrition. You could also, in the video, Brad said this is more like combo. It is in a way. Basically, you're trying to get that small advantage in the early turns of the game and use that to snowball into one big push, in this case, to just overwhelm your opponent and win on the spot.
100%. And there's some armies that can just slam down. I mean, weirdly enough, sometimes the board control can be an attrition, and some of these can overlap. For instance, in a lot of my games with my Vanguard list, with the Ultramarine list, with the Marne's Calgar, I definitely came up with, not you. But you drop down with, 15 to 18 aggressors and 6 cents and just go, oh, everything's gone? Cool. This is so much easier now. So one of the big things we have to talk about is, who's the aggressor? Watch the Magic video. It's amazing. Who's the beatdown? It actually still applies. It's like 20 years old now.
100%.
So let's break that down, because there's a big deal of knowing what these armies are trying to do, which makes them what they are. And it's important to know this because of the fact that you have to understand what you're trying to do, because you want a game plan going into every game. The game's not about just killing some models. The game's about, sometimes it's about killing models, but it has to be, how am I scoring? How am I denying? How am I setting up for the next turn? And then you have to ask yourself, am I playing the army that I think I'm playing?
Exactly, Brad. This is macro gameplay. The first thing we need to say about this is it does not matter if things are going well for you or poorly for you. You have your role in the matchup before you have everything else. If your opponent, Brad and I talk about this to each other quite often. If your opponent just rolls 6s, good game, man. Most of the time, regardless of how the board is starting to look or not, your army is still going to be good at its role, and your opponent's army is still going to be stuck in their role. What I mean by that, if you push your knight's army forward and you lose one big knight, you are still a big knight stat check army. You should plan on losing one big knight every single game you play. You do not change your plan because suddenly your opponent rolled hot and you rolled poorly on your 4 pinvolts and your big knight went down. Your plan is still exactly the same.
Hold on, I'm going to go to the wall for 2 things. One, Lyle Dixon with a $2, who's the beatdown, baby? And then Zach, how do you overcome hating rolling 800 dice? You literally don't hate rolling 800 dice because that's awesome, and you understand that you should also like puppies, sunshine, and ice cream. Continue on with life.
Agreed. So if you're playing a stat check army, if you're playing this kind of Night Star army, the example I'm going to use is Chaos Knights. You are trying to be the person who pushes first, gets into the engagement first against board control and attrition armies. So this means if you're playing something, for example, Chaos Knights, you are going to run straight at Tyranids. Tyranids are a board control army. Anyone who's been playing Tyranids knows that sometimes they have that turn where they just don't do any damage. And that's because the Tyranid army is designed around good positioning, good game knowledge, and a few gimmicks. Well, Chaos Knights, especially if you're running the meta list of just how many War Dogs can I take, you're just going to push straight at them. because I guarantee you they're not going to kill all your Chaos Knights in one turn, which means you will have a turn where you just get to shoot whatever you want.
Did I just hear Tom out of nowhere from the Shadow Realm saying, "Challenge accepted, Sean"?
Exactly, 100%. Tom does have experience playing his town, killing all of my little armigers, so we're not gonna go into that dark hole. And then against an aggro army, they kind of want to trade. The advantage of this is one armiger, kind of tough. Aggro army really needs to commit more than one resource to kill. Well, when they do that, Chaos Knights get to walk out 2 armigers and take care of it. Well, if it took 2 of their units to kill 1 armiger, it's going to take 4 units to kill 2. And that's where you can start looking to, set up a push after that you've traded for a little bit. But also because if you just run all 13 of your Chaos Knights straight into World Eaters, Angron's going to kill 2 of them by himself, an 8-bound unit's going to kill 2 of them, and suddenly you've lost the game. So your role changes based on.
I'm so bummed that you didn't mention the Master of Executions. Who is a plague on the game.
Yeah, that guy just reads, "Did you roll 5s to win? Okay, here, take 36 damage." Yeah, not a scary piece at all in the World Eaters list. Moving on, you have aggro. As you might expect, they're trying to push first. They're trying to push early. They're trying to push often. World Eaters can push on turn 1. So, we gave that kind of breakdown of how the turns look. World Eaters can shorten that all to immediately, I run at you and hit you with everything. That's kind of their specialty. They're the epitome of the most aggro you can be. And the second example would be orcs. You are trying to move up into turn 1, get in position, and then wah, and get right into your opponent. Now, are there corner cases where you're not doing that? Can you be baited into doing it other times? Of course. But that is the general idea. If you got it to work out your way every single time, your orcs would move up into position on turn 1 and wah and hit all of their units on turn 2. So we have board control. This is where, yes, this is the headache army. If you have ever played against Sisters of Battle, that's my example. I'm not going to even give more than if you played against the Sisters of Battle army and you're just like, this person is running around trying to assemble the master plan, and I'm just like killing T3 bodies over and over again. And then suddenly, Sisters have 88 points and you won with 91 to 88. That's honestly how it looks when you're playing a board control army. You are trying to delay when you have to push all your resources forward and trying to eke out as many small advantages during the game as you can. Brad mentioned this is kind of where you want to be trading. If Sisters could just trade for 5 turns, they would win every game. Like it's unbelievable how cheap their units are and how much they can get done. Finally, you have attrition. You can also call this combo. You are trying to delay that push. You're trying to delay having to put all of your units into all of their units until you know you're going to win that fight. Thousand Sons is the best example. If you've played against Thousand Sons this edition, Magnus has soloed 3 of your units before you've done anything. I know that because I played with and against lots of Thousand Sons, and that's kind of what the army does. Magnus main modes into 3 of your units and kicks them off the table. And then you engage with the Thousand Sons army. And that's what an attrition army is trying to do. You could also replace this with 3 Manticores and 3 Basilisks in the corner. Before a guard really wants to step out, they want you to have taken some losses.
And it's annoying. Now I'm going to call this the KR portion of the cast, which is please like and subscribe. Check out some of our other videos. Check out the Patreon. It really helps us. It gets us on the analytics and helps us continue to do these things. Thank you so much. Turn 0, my favorite turn. The art of being a coward. The art of being a coward and setting up to be a coward the rest of the game. Because deployment determines what you do for the rest of the game. Again, you can't deploy to win, but you can deploy to not lose. Because if you deploy incorrectly, you are paying for it the rest of the game. One of the things I hear the most in coaching is, I felt like I was a turn behind. And that's because you deployed poorly. So you have to deploy and you have to pre-measure. I cannot state that enough. Pre-measure, pre-measure, pre-measure. You have to deploy in a spot where you're going to take the least amount of fire. You want to take 0 if possible, but mitigating is the best thing. But you have to be able to get to the next piece of terrain, interact with that objective, stop your opponent from scoring, taking points away, but also scoring your points. Again, every time you grab a model, you should ask yourself, how am I scoring? How am I denying? How am I setting up for the next turn? And if you don't have an answer for that question, well, just don't move that model yet. because you don't move to move. You have to know where things are going, and that all stems from the deployment. And your deployment is going to be different based on mission, and your deployment is going to be different based on what you're playing against. Your deployment's going to be wildly different versus World Eaters on Board Corners or Eldar on Crucible. You know what I mean? There's going to be a wild difference on that. You have to know the size of your army. This is the thing that I think that you should be practicing the most because it's the easiest. Maybe you don't even like TTS. Maybe you've got a home table. Look at your army, know the size of your butt. You got to be able to. A lot of ideas sound fantastic, and then you put them on the board and you realize, oh, this doesn't fit anywhere without me getting shot on turn one. This puts me in the corner. I don't have things like infiltrators. I need scout moves. I need to get the hell out of my deployment zone, because in the end, you can have infinite max damage with the Power Stone. And if I'm playing and Sean has infinite damage, he can kill as much shit as he wants that he can see, and I move block him into the corner for 3 turns and he kills everything, it doesn't matter because I'm up 60-5. You know what I mean? You can table
channel your inner Robin Williams. Infinite cosmic power. Play space.
But it's a big thing though, and that's why things like infiltrate. If you have 4 deploying units options in your army, almost always, there's only a few exceptions when they're just bad. I'm talking to you, stupid orcs. God, those guys make me mad. But everything else, you need the ability to stop people from doing things. 4 deploying versus World Eaters, for instance, is the difference between, oh crap, things are happening on turn 1 and they basically did nothing on turn 1. And usually they're cheap. We were just talking before we went live, Necrons. You're like, hey, what's an auto include for me? Blade ones, because they're a 4 deploying unit. Almost every army. And it's a huge deal. Using infiltrating units effectively is one of the hardest things to do in the game, and it's one of the most effective and profitable things in the game. It's crazy. Also, you have to know your mission. I cannot stress that goes with taking knowing your score projected, and the score on this is how I'm scoring. You know, I can't tell you the amount of people I see taking 4 objectives on priority targets, scorched earth, and you're like, why are you so extended? You get 10 points. You can score 2 objectives basically. Like, why are you on those other ones? Kill your opponent off them. But besides that, there's no real reason. The only time you should be doing that is if you've got an overwhelming ability to crush. You know, if you're dismantling your opponent's army, cool. Otherwise, no.
And that actually builds into the next slide, which is actually the first turn of the game, where you need to figure out, instead of running to all 4 objectives in priority target, you need to establish where you're going to play the game from. Being able to say, hey, my home area is here. I'm going to hold these 2 for the rest of the game, is one of the key things you need to establish on deployment, yes, and also the first turn. It doesn't matter if you set up to do your thing if you just abandon the plan as soon as the game starts. So the first thing you probably should do is decide if you're going to play the game from a Dawn of War perspective or a Hammer and Anvil perspective. All this means is that you're going to pick 2 objectives, and those are your objectives. You're going to then pick an objective you'd like to trade over. Because as we said, if you are not trading, you are just running at your opponent. If you are not running at your opponent on the following turn, you probably should think about trading or mitigating a trade. So you got to know where you're going to be doing that. It doesn't help if I put all my Tomb Blades hidden behind a crate on the right-hand corner if the objective I need to trade over is on the left side of the board. Those Tomb Blades are fast, but they're not that fast, and they're certainly not going to be able to get there if I go first on turn 1.
I do want to pause real quick. I want to get a great question on this. Yeah, where's the reserves on the deployment side? That is literally what I consider part of deploying, is considering what is in reserve and what is not. And that is part of the, what things fit and what things don't.
Yeah, I actually consider that all in one step. And that, Kara, that kind of goes into what we were saying at the start, is we could take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and give you tons of content on this. But seeing that we only have the broad strokes here, we're trying to give you as broad picture, condensed as much as possible to still be useful. For example, if you wanted to take a picture of each of these slides and then just bring it with you to your next game, you would the game would take a little longer, but I think you'd honestly play a better game afterwards.
Great.
Getting back into it, the next thing you need to do after you have your home objectives, you know what's going on, you know if you're going to be pushing to this side or the other side or straight up the middle, you need to actually look at what your opponent's doing. They don't have any choice but to tell you where they're going. No, you do not have to ask them where they're going. I can literally look at any board and know exactly where my opponent's trying to go. That's just part of the game. You get to get up, or in my case, I never sit during a tournament. Just walk around. Oh, sorry. If you're at FLG, walk all the way down the table, around the side, and come all the way back and look at all of their models. And you should be doing that.
Also means that if you sit down, your dice roll worse. What's that, Brad? Are you unbelievably superstitious about that? Yes, I am.
Yeah, there is that too. Also, why he has unicorns everywhere. So you have to look at where your opponent is actually moving to, and finalize. Hey, you made a mistake here. I just realized that if I move here in turn 1, you don't have any choice but to be shot. There's nowhere you can hide. And this is not, gotching your opponent. This is saying, hey, you did not deploy close enough to do this thing in 2 turns. Okay, so if I just run my units right up there and block that space, you now physically can't make it to that objective. Or if I just move my guys up here on the following turn, there's nowhere you can be on the board to be hidden from this shooting. You need to be able to know that on turn 1 when you're moving into position. Because a lot of times you run out of time fast in a 40k game. 5 turns feels like a lot, and then suddenly it's turn 3 and you're down by a few points, and you don't have a lot of time left.
In my next slide. Oh, did I just make a GIF for that also? Oh, yes, I did. Making him an offer he can't refuse. You're welcome. And about this, trade requests, mine for yours. You have to give people, this is my favorite way to initiate trades, is to just straight tell your opponent, you have to do something about this. This is such a big deal on this. I love taking 25-point Crusaders, my scout unit that possibly could run away if it's Vanguard. Anything that has move outside of the movement phase moves, and there's several of them now. Barely toe touch an objective and just go, hey, I'm behind a wall. You can't see me. Don't stand in the open and take things. They just shoot you. It sucks. But make them bring something, especially after you've taken out their trash, which is what you want to do. Make them commit something real to your trash. It makes me happy inside. I get a warm glow every time I trade a scout, a crusader, or don't trade them and run away and then kill a real unit. It's very, very big because you have to give somebody a real reason. I basically put something on an objective that's hard to reach, preferably behind a wall, and say, do something about this. You always want people to be finishing. When you're trading, I want to be trading on my side of walls because I get to see you without the rest of your army seeing me. And that it feels amazing when I get to go, oh, cool, your chosen had to trash this random unit. Cool. I would love to shoot you. And nobody, especially those stupid Forge fiends, get to see me. That feels great, and you can set that up. It also gives you a chance for setting up that push turn. You start taking away a couple of your opponent's pieces, and in doing so, increasing your presence in the board and increasing that staging area. You're kind of inching up, and then you go, okay, well, now everything's in range. Boom. That's when you push. You don't push when you're like, well, I sure hope I make these 6 9-inch charges. And then you talk to me as I'm sitting drinking my wine and you go, I can't believe I didn't win this game. I'm like, I believe it. I believe so hard you didn't make it. Because you have to lure them in. Always cheat the dice in your favor. Make it so that you have way more than your opponent has. Give yourself that big chance. I try not to do anything unless it's 83% chance of doing it. That's basically only a 1 in 6. It's a dice rolling game. I'm willing to fail on a 1. You know what I mean? But otherwise, I don't want to do that. And the biggest thing is threats. I can't tell you enough how big of a deal me threatening to go all in. That's one of the reasons World Eaters are such a nasty army right now, is they don't have to make that wild turn one push, but they can. And they can continue to extend. That's why CSM is such a crazy army. Hey, I could go 27 inches with these Chosen. You have to respect that. Feel free to go jump on that middle objective. I will just do stuff. And I love the last part of it. Oh, I gotta get my chi together, John. I see this happen so often. 5 points is not worth losing a 300 point model or 300 point unit. It's so big when I see somebody going, I'm going to do area denial with this expensive thing. And then they just get Hogan leg drop RKO out of nowhere, everything in their brother. And you're like, I don't understand what happened. I scored 5 points for area denial. You're like, those guys got murder faced. You can't lose real resources for a couple points. You have to constantly, and it's a nerd thing on it, but you have to be running the profit loss statement at all times of what is the future cost of me losing this unit? Is this worth 5 points? What's worth 5 points? Is 55 points worth 5 points? You know what I mean? What is the future cost of losing the thing that you're scoring with?
That's actually a really good point that I hadn't even included on here. Is a lot of times when you're making a list as quote unquote a pro player, you're trying to keep your unit cost down as much as possible so that you can reach this threshold of like 150 points or less to score 3 to 5 points. The more times you can do that in a game, the better off your army is going to be, number one, but also the closer your games are going to be, which kind of changes how your opponent needs to play the game. If it's always going to be a close game and they can't quite tell who's going to win, it might entice them to make some things that don't necessarily seem like a mistake. For example, attempting an 8-inch charge that you should make some amount of the time versus just staying behind that wall and letting everything continue on as normal. And you're not going to see those decisions if you're always throwing all of your Terminators right in the middle to do cleanse. You know, you're basically saying, I'm not going to play the game anymore. I'm just going to try to roll 2-ups on my Terminators or, you know, whatever it is. Basically, the Dark Angels list from last season, where it was just, I'm going to stand here because my rules are unfair. I'm just going to hope I don't roll bad or you don't roll good. You don't want to be doing that in a normal game.
Yep. I was just yelling about the playmakers talking about how he's like, oh, I'm bending over these tables. It's so terrible. I'm like, it's so much better than the fact that on tall tables, I just ignore the middle because I can't reach it. I'm like, I guess we just don't play here. Take the middle objective. You just know I'm not coming there. The push. The push is a big deal because you have to know when it's time. You go too soon, you're going to get your ass kicked. You go too late, and it doesn't matter because you already lost the game. Exactly. Brad, would you like a boost or should I fetch you a box? A box, please, sir. A box.
Wine box, preferably.
Yes. I would definitely Master Blaster Playmaker. But it's a big deal on this because how much have you already lost? And this is a big deal. I'll give you one of the big mistakes that I see consistently is Sean and I play. Sean has a big turn. He rolls nothing but 6s. I roll nothing but 1s. I'm like, oh no, I guess it's time to push because I've lost a bunch of my stuff. No, it is not. It is time to epically not push. It is time to sit and lay and wait and make the game slower. Slow that game down, give me more turns. Then I make a late game push. Just keep scoring points. Commit to the plan. Trade, trade, trade. Score, score, score. Also, people tend to get overconfident after they made their push. If you're in the game, if you have a chance, hold on, I'm going to give everybody my cat hanging on office poster. Give yourself an opportunity to have an opportunity. The dice will come back. Keep yourself in the game. As long as you have models on the board, you have a chance to score more points. Maybe your opponent just draws 2 trash cards and all of a sudden you have a 10-0 turn. You scored an extra primary. You denied something. You keep yourself in the game and know it. Now, the difference in this is, and this is something that I've done too many times, which is I prolong way too many games. Sometimes you have to shorten that game down. You just had that huge turn. what do you do? What you do is don't let your opponent prolong that game. You want to shorten this down. You've got him at a disadvantage. There's no better time to kick a man in the face than when he's on the ground. So much closer to your foot. Go kick him. Put him down. Put your foot on the throat and take it. I can't tell you the amount of games that I've made too hard sometimes by not taking advantage of a huge advantage. You got to know when it's time and when it's not time. And that's very difficult sometimes. Top tables, bottom tables, any tables.
It does require a lot of experience, especially even when I was practicing just the other week too. I mean, knowing when to commit like that and when to not commit, it really does take a lot of discipline to know, like, okay, cool, I'm going to lose like half these units, but they don't get to kill anything else after that. And that's just something you find after you've played your army for a while, or you've been playing for a while. And then once you see it, you know, okay, cool, they're going to kill half these units, but I'm going to score all my points, and then I'm going to run at them, and sure, my models are going to die, but I'm also going to score more points because they can't just not shoot them again. And then suddenly it's turn 4, and you're looking pretty good because you're up by 30, 35. And sure, they get to catch up a little bit, but you're just going to score a few points here and there, and then it's probably going to be unattainable.
And it's a big thing on that because you have to, and also, I want to get into the post-push turn because these go together. Because one of the biggest things is after the push is knowing when to go after units, because you are going to lose some stuff after the push. You're putting yourself at risk. You're committing lots of resources. And then you start having to make, what is the score? What does this right here? I can kill this unit. What does this unit do to the status of the game? When I say the status of the game, I mean the score of the game. How is that unit scoring points? Is that unit denying me points? If the answer is no for the next available turn, then I don't need to kill it. Move on and reassess, because you're going to have less shit in the end game. You don't want to be off of objectives killing stuff. If you're not standing on an objective when you're murdering someone, you got to ask why you're not on an objective murdering somebody, because you're not changing the score at that point in time. If that unit was going to, the only thing that could get back to your home objective and that your opponent has captured enemy outpost, yes, that means that you're changing the status of the game, the potential status of the game. But just going to kill something, especially late game after the push, is a big deal because you can't be caught away from. One of the biggest and most often things I see is attacking objectives and things like supply drop, where the objectives go away. I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen someone push super hard back to back on objectives that were going to go away the next turn. You're like, congratulations, you have now killed units on two objectives that don't exist anymore. You could have just left them alone. It's so important to know what the mission is, what the score is, why you're getting engagements in right now.
Before you go on with it, Brad, there's also a moment that really changed for me when I was playing 40K, when I could look at a unit on the board and say, all right, it's not scoring any points this turn. Where can it move? Okay, it can't score any points next turn. So for 2 turns, that's almost half the entire game. It's just not doing anything. And once you can do that with multiple units on the board, you'll immediately know what matters and what doesn't matter. Now, good players will put their units in play for every turn for most of the game. But the more you play people and you realize, wait a minute, that unit's not doing anything. And it doesn't matter if it walks over here and shoots this thing. It's not scoring any points that way either. Basically, that unit has removed itself from the game for 2 turns.
I cannot stress that enough. I don't engage with things, or I'll move block something and then just leave it alone. Because if something isn't affecting the game, why am I trying to use resources on something that's not affecting the game? Cool, go ahead. That means I can, again, cheat the dice. That means that if Sean's unit can't get to where it needs to go, I'll use anything that was going to engage with it and engage with this. So now I have redundancy. Now, even if I roll poorly, if I have a column shift over in those rolls, I have one more unit that can also finish the job. So you always want to put the dice in your favor. Always may the dice always be in your favor.
And that goes along with, kind of taking a step back on turn 4 and kind of reassessing who's ahead, who's behind, what units aren't going to do anything anymore. because it doesn't matter if Angron comes back if you just drop down in the backfield to kill 6 Inceptors. Angron is now not going to exist for turns 4 and 5.
So
like
big.
you just know that.
And I was explaining how I'll get into that. That's a story for a different time. But final scoring. It's just a big deal in making sure you know what your score is and what the potential score is, what the end score is going to be. You shouldn't be surprised. You need to know when you needed to push. That's the big thing here. And there's sometimes when you need to know with this final score, hey, if I don't do anything, am I winning? Then don't do anything. Literally just stand there. Dice are dice. If I'm winning and there's nothing, or not even nothing, but like he has to come up and push and then I can counter it, there's no reason for me to jam my models, trying to jam them down Sean's throat, when all of a sudden I go, oh shit, I only rolled ones, he rolled only 6s, and he consolidated and he moved up and he used that move. Instead of having a no charge, he's now got a 10-inch charge, and he makes his 10-inch charge, and all of a sudden I lost a bunch of points, and if I would have just done nothing, he wouldn't have been able to interact with me at all. It's an important deal.
And that goes along with, you're not trying to deny your opponent, like, hey, I'm going to go try to make these 10-inch charges. I mean, you don't tell them, like, no, don't do that. We don't have time. We don't need to roll that. It's not about saying that to your opponent. It's about saying, okay, cool. We're going to, check the score. We've already been checking it for the last couple turns. We know who's probably going to win. Is there anything you can do about that you see? You don't have to tell your opponent what you see, just if they see. And you roll what matters. You don't roll what doesn't. Again, that Forge Fiend who moved over into the corner and shot something and now is just in Guam over there in the corner. Like, I don't care where he moves or what he does. Like, if you just want to say he moves forward and kills something, don't care. Like, that's not going to change the score.
Well, I'm going to go to Austin on this one, though. He goes, always fight, always roll the most narrative fights. If Angron comes back T5 and you can charge Gaz into him, you do that. That is true. Because in the end, it's toys. Remember, you just spent a few hours with this person. You should be cool. You should be having a good time. In the end, you're playing with toys. Enjoy yourself. Know what's going on. Have a conversation. We'll talk about this in just a second. But there's a big thing on this is when you're looking at your units remaining. This is when you should be planning on not just your end of the game, but also how can I get better in the next game? Did I need to throw units away? Could I have thrown more units away to move block, to score more? What do I have? Are a bunch of my trash units alive? Kind of, why are they alive? You know what I mean? What could I have done differently? I like to assess every game immediately because it helps you grow the most, to be honest with you. It's very, very big on that. Just was I out of position? Could I have used my units a little bit more effectively? You ready for the good stuff? The real thing, Sean?
Oh, yeah, this picture's the best, by the way.
Game breakers.
Oh, such good memories of shooting people with Sunshark bombers and
good memories.
Oh,
but it's so not good memories for so many people.
Oh, we all took Tau to last LVO. We should all feel bad. Getting into those exceptions, there are a lot of things you can do in this game. I'm just gonna say that. Some
Flyers
of them
can burn in hell.
Some of them completely change the flow of what we're talking about, and let's talk about why. Flyers and indirect. I know this is a section where Brad just hates because he doesn't want them to exist, and that's okay. They're part of the game. Why are they a problem? Why do top players not like them? Okay, we've gone over kind of this dichotomy of like, this is what the turn looks like, this is how the game's played, and this is why it's played that way. And then you have this unit that flies and just zooms across the board if they go first and starts shooting you right away. And all that careful planning and measuring just doesn't matter. They're just shooting you.
Hey, can I interact with that flyer? Can I touch it?
No, maybe. That was the thing last edition is I'm just going to fly over you and bomb you, and you can't do anything about it. And then I'm going to come back and shoot you again first. So that's why kind of flyers were a problem.
Sorry. The two on the wall were I'm drinking during games. Am I doing it wrong? And 40K is like speed dating for nerd friends. You're so not wrong.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's very
continue on, my
accurate.
friend.
No, that was really good actually. Yeah, where is it? Oh, and indirect fire. Indirect fire for the same reason. It breaks the parity of this game. Yes, there's guard, but guard plays in this kind of attrition style that matches up with that both thematically and how they play on the board. Desolation Marines, on the other hand, are in the board control army where they can suddenly stand behind a wall and just kill a unit a turn. That is not in line with the design philosophy behind a board control army, and it's not at all in line with how the game is actually designed to be played. It is just a unit that is just thrown in there because they wanted to, push a cool model. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I love the Lion. The Lion is an awesome model. I love Angron. Angron's an awesome model. Desolation Marines, I think, look silly. However, the same argument still applies. There are some people who love sweet models, and they need to give them a role.
Hold on. $5 super check coming in from Mr. Lyle Dixon. Pushes up the glasses. Actually, that was a razor shark, not a sun shark. Razor sharks have never been a problem, sir.
All I'm going to say is we can't quite see the little bomb coil on the bottom half, so whatever, Lyle. Hitting us with the actually here. Oh, man. All right, whatever. Getting back onto it. Okay. Fire and fading and out of phase movement. That's like your phantasm type nonsense. Brad, why don't you give me a 30-minute diatribe on why phantasm is bad for the game?
To be punted into the sun. Why didn't they go, hey guys, here's the problem with phantasm. It sucks balls. And we killed it. We strangled it. We resurrected it. We shot it twice in the head. Then we resurrected it again so we could know that it was being punted into the sun. Shit that happens in your opponent's turn is trash.
Yeah, and that's the reason why, if you're trying to play this trading game or you're trying to set up a push and your opponent just goes, cool, I'm going to shoot you, and then you can't do anything to me back. It's the same thing with indirect fire. You're not really offering a trade. You're just saying, I'm going to shoot you several times and you can't do anything about it. That doesn't feel very good for the flow of the game. It's probably a little too good. And it really forces you to play the game in a way that maybe your army isn't set up to do. If you are sisters and you want to try to trade a small unit in the middle and your opponent just goes, cool, I'm going to move these Shadow Specters out and kill them. And then they're going to go back behind this wall. Wow, look at that. So engaging. Also, these Night Spinners will shoot you. That's where it starts to be a problem. And why that kind of changes how you need to think about the game that you're playing differently than, hey, these are my objectives for each turn. Because sometimes your opponent may not even play by those rules.
In the resurrected models, I want to talk about this for a little bit because I think that this is under talked about as far as your counters to it. Because you can stop people from coming back onto an objective. Don't interact. Don't let your opponent, don't shoot trash fire into a unit of accursed cultists, waste shots, and then they're just going to regen right back on it anyways. You can also move block on, surround things so they can't bring models onto where they want to. Sometimes you're just going to stall Angron. You're going to make him go into the corner and kill something. You're going to get him tied up into something that takes him a turn or two to kill, and you're not even going to kill him because you don't want him showing up on turn 5 in a rapid ingress. You have to have deep strikes. You have to have reserves. You have to have fast moving models. There's something that moves, or at least has some sort of extra movement in almost every army, because things like sticky objectives exist. You have to be able to toe touch on and take it away from somebody.
That's exactly right. And Austin has a good point in the chat, and that's exactly why the Necron kind of reanimate is on here. If you go up to trade and you feel like you do a bunch of damage, and then they just put their models back on the board, suddenly you're not trading anymore. They're just scoring and losing a few points. So you need to decide in your game, as Brad said, how do I mitigate that? How do I set up a faster push? Do I trade harder? Do I, skew kind of my opponent to go the direction they don't want to go by deploying all of my guys on the right corner and pushing them all forward? You need to decide that ahead of time, and you need to know that that's what the game is going to be about. This is for all of you. You're going to be playing against Necron Wraiths. If you were watching this right now, you will play against Necron Wraiths or with them very soon. And you need to know that just doing a little bit of damage to that Wraith unit over time is not going to be a winning strategy when they can just regrow onto the objective.
And double gen too, because yes. Now,
Yes.
Shamelessly promotion. Coaching classes. We're going to start to be doing 2 classes a month, which you can show up to. That will be online. There will be a couple at several tournaments, but we're going to be doing duo coaching sessions where we'll have up to 15 people in any particular session, and then we'll have them online for on demand, I guess it's called, for you young folks. Individual coaching sessions are also available. Individual sessions, monthly coachings. The details are going to be available kind of in the video description because we are setting up. I've got 2 new things. We'll have a web portal. We have a lot of links that we're going to be putting up. And all of this is going to be starting in January. We've got it set up, ready to rock and roll. A new website's being rolled out. And we have tried to be grown-up people and have links to everything that we're doing in all of our videos coming up in January. We will have, in the description of everything, we'll have links to other videos. We'll have links to coaching. We'll have links to upcoming classes that we have scheduled. So hopefully everybody's super involved and is excited about them, or at least is half as excited as I am about them.
Oh yeah, Brad has been pumped about this for a while. We know that some people have been asking. I know that I've gotten lots of questions like, "Hey, what does coaching look like? When is that?" And it's like, we're working on it. Well, now we can finally say, like, this is what we're doing. If you are interested and you want to make sure you get a slot in one of those, you can email me at dicewithrice@gmail.com. It's also in the description. I'm going to field those all first before we get our website up and running, and then we will start directing people to that website whenever it actually finalizes in the new year.
100%. Now, allow coming to the $5 super chat. When do people get to start watching me kick your butt on live streams? That will also be starting at the end of January, actually. Because I want to get a couple tests up before we get everything going, because I like to just make everything look a little bit better, do everything. I have been practicing with a bunch of social media. It is terrible, guys. I don't understand what this social media thing is, and it's awful. So the other thing is deal with it coaching. Could be a future video. Yes. The other thing with the coaching, the sessions that we're going to be doing as far as the coaching classes, we will be putting up in here. We're going to look for comments. What do you guys want to see us cover? Obviously, we're going to do deployment. So we're probably going to do deployment several times because we're going to be doing 45 minutes and then questions after. And it's going to take multiple sessions to go over the multiple types of deployment versus certain armies. So it's just a big thing on that. So it's a big deal on this. Now, this is the bonus right here. I made Shaw do this after he sent me, I'd like to cover everything in the universe. And I said, you didn't talk about the psychology and the sportsmanship of the game in coaching, because you have to deal with one of the biggest things in the game is dealing with being on tilt, not getting away from being on tilt. And tilt can come from a lot of things. Hey, we're in a bad match, which is another thing that you have to talk about. I just played into my worst matchup, into the worst army, on the worst mission, and the opening salvo was me rolling 11 out of 12 dice ones, my opponent rolling only 6s for explosions. What are you doing that? You have to get out of that. That's the thing we talk about quite a lot in coaching. Because one of the things I've done entire sessions on is how to go about this and be cool. The psychology of the game. That is such a big deal because threats mean a lot more. Having something in reserve, telling your opponent, it isn't just about YOLOing. It's about that, here's how far my guys can go. Threaten that. Continue to have threats. If you just blah, your opponent no longer has to worry about that anymore because you've just blahed. You pushed too early. Mental fatigue through a tournament. Really, this is a big thing that's near and dear to my heart as someone that has, I think, that's too many working organs. So if mental fatigue is a real thing over the course of the game, you have to come with preparation. Preparation counters mental fatigue to a lot of things. You get into the habit of doing things. You play like you practice. The more tired you get, the more you are going to go into your base level of play. You need to have your base level of play to the fact that you do the same things all the time, whether you're fresh as a daisy, great sleep, or you accidentally hung out with me for 2 days in a 3-day tournament and you never went home, went to bed, and now you're dealing with it. Again, the last thing is having a conversation. I always joke about the fact that 99% of the time I can force people into having a fun and good game with me, because you take away all of the gotchas. You take away all of the potential bad times by having an adult conversation. You should already be talking to your opponent. Sorry, introverts, you're playing 40K, you gotta talk. You want to explain exactly what you're doing and the things that you're trying to avoid. And you get a social contract with your opponent. Sean, you move up to 18 with these crisis suits, correct? If I go here, do we both agree that you cannot see me, yes or no? Well, show me. Okay, this is where I'll be. Do you agree on this? Okay, cool. Also, your charge is, looks like if you move and advance max, 9 is charged. We both agree on that? Yes, cool. Models get knocked over. Dice get thrown. Not thrown, but dice get thrown on. Dice hit things. Models get all the time. Make those social contracts with your opponent. I'm boxing out. Do we both agree that you cannot fit this unit back here? Cool. Explain to people what you're doing. Don't make declarations. I've screened my board. That means nothing to your opponent. I won the game.
Oh, can I just declare that? It's like declaring bankruptcy. You just say it, right? And your board is magically
exactly.
screened.
But the thing is that's how you make it so there's not gotcha moments. You talk with your opponent about it. This is what I'm trying to do. Most of the time, there's people that are dicks. I mean, the world exists. But most of the time, your opponent will literally help you defeat them. Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. You're like, actually, I have an assassin. I could fit a guy right here. Actually, I have a strat that I can go slightly farther than this, so I could see you right here. Okay, well, I want to charge here, and I want to make sure that I can't get heroic. Actually, this guy has blah, blah, blah. Explain to your opponent what you're trying to do. I cannot state this enough. Just have those conversations. Tell your opponent what you're trying to do, and they will help you do it. It's a big deal. It really, really helps. You'll win more games because you're going to be in a better mental state. You're going to be prepared, prepped, and playing a better game. With that being said, have a happy holiday, everyone. Enjoy yourself. Eat too much, drink too much, enjoy. Watch my home teams lose on holiday games.
And also, there are up to 40 of you in here. Hit that like button at the bottom of the video. That's also a hidden gem, and it really helps us out. It's one little click.
Like and subscribe, my friends. With that being said, Santa Brad says, enjoy yourself. And we're out, Sean.